Elias Navarro stood frozen, his heart hammering like a war drum, as the weight of the emperor's command crashed over him. Choose a consort by dawn, or the empire will choose for you. The words echoed in the grand hall of the Pacific Crest Estate, a sprawling mansion in Northern California that served as the nerve center of the emperor's dominion, a modern empire built on tech, power, and unyielding loyalty. He was 28, a man of sharp intellect and sharper ambition, with warm brown skin and eyes that held a storm of secrets. Elias had clawed his way from the fringes of Oakland's toughest streets to become the emperor's most trusted advisor, a position that demanded perfection. But this was a test he hadn't prepared for. The emperor, a reclusive billionaire named Victor Hale, ruled his corporate empire with an iron fist and a cryptic smile, and now he demanded Elias bind himself to another for life, publicly, irrevocably, to solidify alliances in a world where love was a transaction. The hall buzzed with suitors, their polished smiles and calculated charms suffocating him. Men and women from every corner of the empire. New York's elite, Seattle's tech moguls, Miami's vibrant influencers, vied for his favor. Elias scanned the room, his gaze landing on Julian Voss, a 30-year-old diplomat from Boston with tousled chestnut hair and green eyes that seemed to see through him. Julian stood apart, leaning against a marble pillar, his cream linen shirt slightly unbuttoned, exuding a quiet confidence that made Elias's pulse stutter. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the chaos of the room faded. Julian's lips curved into a half-smile, and Elias felt a spark, dangerous, electric, forbidden. He'd always known he was drawn to men, but in the emperor's world, such truths were buried under duty. Yet Julian, with his sharp wit and unshakable calm, had been different from the start. They'd worked together on trade negotiations, their late-night talks veering from policy to dreams, from guarded words to fleeting touches. Elias had never dared name the feeling growing between them, but tonight, it burned. Elias, a voice snapped, pulling him back. It was Mara, the emperor's enforcer, a 35-year-old woman with steel-gray eyes and a knack for sniffing out weakness. The clock's ticking. Hale doesn't wait. She gestured to the suitors, her tailored black suit as sharp as her tone. Pick someone, or you'll regret it. Elias nodded, his throat tight. The empire's rules were clear. A consort wasn't just a partner, but a political statement, a way to cement power. He moved through the crowd, shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries, but his mind was on Julian. The man's presence pulled at him like gravity, and by midnight, Elias found himself at Julian's side, the two of them slipping onto a balcony overlooking the estate's gardens. The air was cool, scented with jasmine and sea salt from the nearby Pacific. Julian leaned against the railing, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "You don't want this, do you?" he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. Being forced to choose. Elias's breath caught. "It's not about want. It's about survival." He hesitated, then added, "But if I had a choice, I'd know who I'd pick." Julian turned, his green eyes searching Elias's face. "Careful, Navarro. Words like that could start a revolution." His tone was teasing, but there was an edge to it, a challenge that made Elias's heart race. They stood closer now, the space between them shrinking. Elias could smell Julian's cologne, sandalwood and citrus, and feel the warmth of his breath. For a moment, he imagined defying the emperor, choosing Julian not as a political move, but because every fiber of his being screamed for it. But doubt not at him. What did Julian truly want? Was he here for love, or was he playing the same game as everyone else? As the night wore on, Elias's decision loomed. The emperor had given him until dawn, and the suitors' masks of charm were slipping, revealing ambition, greed, fear. Only Julian seemed real, his quiet strength a beacon in the storm. But Elias had learned long ago that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. He needed to know Julian's heart before he made his choice. By 3 a.m., the estate was quiet. The suitors retired to their rooms. Elias found Julian in the library, a sprawling room of oak shelves and leather-bound books. Julian was flipping through a volume of poetry, his fingers tracing the words. "Rilke," he said without looking up. He wrote about love like it was a battlefield. Elias sat beside him, their knees brushing. "Is that what this is? A battlefield?" Julian closed the book, his gaze intense. "It's whatever you make it, Elias. But you're not the only one with something to lose." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Elias wanted to ask what Julian meant, to unravel the man's guarded heart, but the clock was ticking. He stood, offering his hand. "Walk with me. One last time before I decide." They wandered into the gardens, the moonlight casting shadows on the cobblestone paths. Elias's mind raced. Julian was his choice, his only choice, but fear clawed at him. What if Julian's feelings were a lie? What if this was just another move in the Empire's endless chess game? As they reached a stone bench beneath an ancient oak, Julian stopped, his hand grazing Elias's. "You're scared," he said softly. "I see it. But you don't have to do this alone." Elias's chest tightened. He wanted to believe Julian, to let go of the walls he'd built. But then, as their hands touched, something impossible happened. A voice, Julian's voice, echoed in Elias's mind, clear as if spoken aloud. "I love him, but if he picks me, they'll destroy us both." Elias froze, his blood turning to ice. He hadn't heard Julian speak. Those were his thoughts, raw, unguarded, secret. But how? And what did they mean? Elias stumbled back, his heart pounding so loudly he thought Julian might hear it. The voice in his head, Julian's voice, repeated, "I love him, but if he picks me, they'll destroy us both." He stared at Julian, whose green eyes were wide with concern, oblivious to the fact that Elias had just glimpsed his innermost fears. "Elias." Julian's voice was soft, grounding. "What's wrong?" Elias forced a smile, his mind reeling. "Nothing, just the pressure." He turned away, pretending to study the garden's roses, their petals silvered by moonlight. How had he heard Julian's thoughts? Was it stress, some trick of the mind, or something else entirely? The Pacific Crest Estate was rumored to house strange technologies, relics of the Emperor's experiments in neurotech. Had Elias been exposed to something that let him hear what shouldn't be heard? He needed answers, but first, he needed to understand Julian's warning. "They'll destroy us both." Who were they? The Emperor? His enforcers? Or someone else lurking in the Empire's shadows? Elias's role as advisor had taught him that power came with enemies, and the Emperor's court was a nest of vipers. If Julian knew something, Elias had to uncover it before dawn. They walked in silence, the crunch of gravel underfoot the only sound. Elias stole glances at Julian, whose calm exterior hid the turmoil Elias had just glimpsed. He wanted to confront him, to demand the truth, but that would mean admitting what he'd heard, and he wasn't ready to explain the impossible. Instead, he steered them toward the estate's labyrinth, a maze of towering hedges that stretched into the darkness. "Let's get lost for a while," Elias said, his voice steadier than he felt. Julian raised an eyebrow but followed, their shoulders brushing as they entered the maze. The air grew cooler, the hedges closing in. Elias's mind churned. Julian's thoughts had confirmed his love, and that alone made Elias's heart ache with hope. But the fear in those words, "They'll destroy us," was a blade at his throat. He needed to test Julian, to see if he could trust him. "Julian," Elias said, stopping at a fork in the maze. "Why are you here? Really, you could have walked away from this circus." Julian's jaw tightened, his eyes flickering with something unreadable. "I'm here because I believe in you, Elias." You're not like the others. You see the Empire for what it is, a machine that grinds people down. I thought maybe we could change it. Together." The words were earnest, but Elias's new gift, or curse, itched to test them. He stepped closer, their faces inches apart, and focused, willing that strange connection to spark again. And it did. Julian's voice flooded his mind. "He's too good for this place. But if I tell him the truth, he'll hate me." Elias's breath hitched. The truth? What truth? He wanted to grab Julian, shake him, demand answers. Instead, he kept his voice low. "What aren't you telling me, Julian?" Julian's eyes widened, a flash of panic crossing his face. "What? You're hiding something. I can feel it." Elias's words were a gamble, a half-truth to draw Julian out. Julian looked away, his hands clenching. "You don't understand the stakes, Elias. This isn't just about us. There are plans, people watching. If you choose me, it's not just a marriage. It's a declaration." Elias's heart sank. A declaration. Of course. Choosing a man, openly, in the emperor's court, would ripple through the empire. The emperor tolerated same-sex unions for optics, but the old guard, wealthy donors, conservative allies, would see it as a slap in the face. Was that what Julian feared? Or was there more? They reached the center of the maze, a clearing with a fountain that shimmered under the stars. Elias sat on its edge, his mind racing. "If I choose you," he said carefully, "what happens next?" Julian hesitated, then sat beside him, their thighs touching. "We'd be a target. The Emperor's enemies would come for us." And he trailed off, his voice breaking. "There's something I haven't told you." Elias's pulse spiked. He leaned in, desperate for Julian's thoughts to surface again. And they did, unbidden. "I'm part of the resistance. If he picks me, I'll have to betray him." The words hit Elias like a punch. Resistance? Betrayal? His vision blurred, anger and hurt warring inside him. Julian was part of a rebellion against the Emperor, and choosing him would pull Elias into a dangerous web. But worse was the betrayal. Julian loved him, yet he was prepared to use him. Elias stood, his hands shaking. "I need time," he said, his voice cold. "Stay here." Julian called after him, but Elias was already moving, the maze swallowing him as he ran. He needed space, needed to think. The Emperor's deadline was hours away, and now he knew Julian's secret. But the love in those thoughts, "I love him," was real. Could Elias trust it? Or was it just another lie in a world built on them? Elias's footsteps echoed through the maze as he fled, his mind a storm of betrayal and longing. Julian was part of a resistance, a shadowy group plotting against the Emperor. The revelation burned, but worse was the ache of Julian's love, tangled with the threat of betrayal. Elias wanted to scream, to confront him, but the strange ability to hear Julian's thoughts had changed everything. He needed to understand how it worked and why. He emerged from the maze, the estate's lights glowing in the distance. The Pacific Crest estate wasn't just a mansion, it was a fortress of secrets. Elias had heard rumors of the Emperor's experiments, neural interfaces, mind-enhancing tech, but he dismissed them as paranoia. Now he wasn't so sure. Had something in this place unlocked this ability? And if so, who else knew? He slipped into the estate's west wing, a restricted area where the Emperor's private labs were housed. The halls were sterile, lined with locked doors and security cameras. Elias's advisor status gave him access to most areas, but this was uncharted territory. He swiped his badge at a door marked Neurotech Archive and slipped inside. The room was a maze of servers and screens, humming with quiet menace. Elias scanned the files, his fingers trembling as he opened a folder labeled Project Echo. The documents described a prototype implant that amplified neural signals, allowing users to perceive unspoken intentions. Side effects included headaches, disorientation, and, in rare cases, uncontrolled empathic resonance. Elias's stomach churned. He'd been in the Emperor's private study weeks ago, near a device he'd assumed was a prototype speaker. Had it done this to him? A noise behind him made him spin. Mara stood in the doorway, her gray eyes narrowing. Navarro, you're out of bounds. Elias shut the screen, his heart racing. Just researching. For the consort decision. Mara's lips twitched, not quite a smile. You're a terrible liar. Whatever you're digging into, stop. The Emperor's watching. She stepped closer, her voice dropping. Choose wisely, Elias. Some choices can't be undone. She left, but her warning lingered. Elias returned to the gardens, his mind racing. If the Emperor knew about Project Echo, was this ability a test? A trap? He needed to confront Julian. But first, he needed to know if he could trust his own heart. Dawn was approaching, the sky bruising purple. Elias found Julian still at the fountain, his face etched with worry. You ran? Julian said, standing. I thought you'd made your choice. Elias's throat tightened. He focused, willing Julian's thoughts to surface. Nothing. The ability was erratic, unreliable. He'd have to do this the old-fashioned way. Tell me about the resistance, he said, his voice low. Julian froze, his face paling. What are you talking about? Don't lie to me. Elias snapped, stepping closer. I know, Julian. I know you're planning to betray me. Julian's eyes widened, then softened with something like relief. How? How do you know? Elias hesitated. Admitting the truth about his ability felt like exposing a wound, but he was done with secrets. I heard you. Your thoughts. You love me, but you're part of something bigger. Something that'll destroy us. Julian's breath caught, his hands reaching for Elias but stopping short. It's not what you think. The resistance we want to free the Empire, Elias. Hale's power is suffocating us all. I joined them because I believed in a better world. But then I met you. And he swallowed, his voice breaking. I fell in love. I didn't want to drag you into this. Elias's chest ached. He wanted to believe Julian, to trust the love he'd heard in his thoughts. But the Empire was a machine that crushed rebellion, and Elias was its cog. Choosing Julian meant risking everything. His position, his life, their love. I need to know you're with me, Elias said, his voice raw. No lies. No games. Julian stepped closer, his hand cupping Elias's cheek. I'm with you. But if you choose me, we'll have to fight. Together. Elias's resolve wavered. Julian's touch was a lifeline, but the Emperor's deadline loomed. He pulled away, his mind racing. Meet me at the Grand Hall at dawn. I'll give you my answer. As Julian nodded, Elias walked away, the weight of his choice crushing him. He loved Julian, but love in the Emperor's world was a weapon. And now, with the power to hear thoughts, Elias held a weapon of his own, one he didn't fully understand. The Grand Hall was ablaze with morning light as Elias faced the Emperor, Victor Hale, a man in his 50s with silver hair and eyes like cold steel. The suitors stood in a semicircle, their faces a mix of hope and calculation. Julian was among them, his expression unreadable, but Elias felt his presence like a pulse. Hale's voice cut through the silence. Elias Navarro, your choice. Elias's heart pounded. He'd spent the night wrestling with Julian's confession, the resistance, and the strange power coursing through him. Project Echo had given him an edge, but it was a double-edged sword. He'd heard Julian's love, his fear, his truth. But what about the others? As Hale spoke, Elias focused, and a whisper of the Emperor's thoughts surfaced. Choose wisely, or you're expendable. The realization hit hard. The Emperor didn't care about Elias's happiness, only his loyalty. Choosing Julian would mark them both as threats, but backing down meant betraying his own heart. Elias glanced at Julian, whose green eyes held a quiet plea. I'm with you, he'd said. Elias had to believe it. He stepped forward, his voice steady. I choose Julian Voss. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Hale's smile was thin, dangerous, bold. but expected. He leaned forward. You understand the consequences? Elias nodded, his jaw tight. I do. Julian stepped to his side, their hands brushing. The contact sparked another thought. I'll protect him, no matter the cost. Elias's heart swelled. Julian's love was real, and so was his resolve. The ceremony was swift, a public declaration that bound them before the Empire. But as they left the hall, Mara cornered them, her eyes blazing. You've made enemies today, Navarro. Watch your back. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Elias and Julian moved into a wing of the estate, their bond deepening despite the growing tension. The resistance contacted Julian, urging him to act, but he refused, choosing Elias over their cause. Elias, meanwhile, dug deeper into Project Echo, learning to control his ability. He heard whispers of plots against them, enemies in the Emperor's inner circle, jealous suitors, even Mara's calculated loyalty. One night, as they lay together in the garden, Julian's head on Elias's chest, Elias heard his thoughts again. I'd die for him. The words were a vow, and Elias knew he'd do the same. They were no longer just lovers. They were allies in a war they hadn't chosen. The turning point came when Elias intercepted a thought from Mara. The Emperor plans to eliminate them. He and Julian devised a plan, not to overthrow Hale, but to expose his corruption. Using Elias's ability, they gathered evidence of the Emperor's illegal dealings, leaking it to the press. The Empire shook, and Hale's power crumbled. In the end, they didn't destroy the Empire, they reshaped it. Hale was ousted, and a new council rose, with Elias and Julian at its heart. Their love, once a secret, became a symbol of defiance, proving that even in a world of power and betrayal, truth could prevail. As they stood on the balcony of their new home, the Pacific sparkling below, Elias took Julian's hand. We did it, he whispered. Julian smiled, his thoughts clear without Elias needing to hear them. We chose each other. That's what matters. Their kiss was a promise, sealed under the open sky, a testament to a love that had defied an empire.